Hey, what is up, everybody? Scott Jones here, becoming Ultra. I got one of our former featured runners from season, was it 14? Season 14?
Season 14. Yep.
Season 14. We got Mary here, and she's been doing some cool stuff, adventuring around. This is something I'm going to do more of, is just find people who've been in the community or part of the project, or even just people who've listened, who once they kind of went down the rabbit hole of training for an ultra and seeing what their body was capable of, going off and doing bigger and not always bigger, just different things. When it comes down to like opening your mind to what is actually possible out there. So that's one thing we've talked about a lot on the show. And Mary just got back from summiting Kilimanjaro. It's something my wife did back in August with a group that she brought out there. And I just thought it would be really cool because I know you had some trepidation before you went out there.
Oh yeah.
I
Lots
was
of
coaching a little bit
trepidation.
on the ramp up. In the train, the last 3 or 4 weeks, we'll talk about this in a bit, but the last 3 or 4 weeks, the training changed a lot because we were kind of training for some running goals, and then yeah, just a realization of like, okay, you're going to go do this thing in a month. Let's get you on your feet a lot more. Let's just hike around a bit more and not worry about the running part quite as much. But I don't know. Why don't you start? It's been about 2 years of the whole.
Not even just a
Not even
year.
2 years. It's
I
only been.
know. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it was like April of last year.
Oh my
So
gosh, you're right. Holy
I
crap. So
know.
a few months
So much
before
life.
here, so like a year and a quarter since you started training and stuff, right?
Yes, yeah. I started training in October of 23 and then
Oh,
ran the ultra in April of 24. And now it's March.
that was
So
last
yeah,
year. Dude, that feels like a long time ago.
it
I,
does.
I love Sedona. Do you remember Travis who came out and,
Yes.
and had a hard day? So
Hmm.
he's been on, I actually have a call with him today, a coaching call. But he's been on a mission to go back and conquer that thing. Sometimes that doesn't always happen with clients and with buddies that are runners and stuff, but sometimes the race just gets so stuck in your head if you
Yeah.
don't do what you thought you were going to do, that you kind of get on a mission. He's on a mission to go back and conquer that 50 miler. So that's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping he can get some better weather because it was hot for you guys last year, right?
Yeah, we were dying. Well, I'll speak in I statements, but I was dying. Yeah, it took me I definitely hit a wall with the heat and then that like deteriorated the second half of the run, but I still liked it as I shared.
I was
So,
gonna ask a question. So last year, if you can remember, obviously I
yeah.
can't. I thought it was 8 years ago. Um, last year when you trained through the winter, do you think this?
Mhm.
Because you guys had a winter this year, right? It was a lot worse, I think.
It was so much worse. It was psychologically so much worse for two reasons. One, we got more snow and they do such a terrible job of clearing the streets that there was more ice for longer periods of time. But two, with the ultra, I had a goal I was working towards. And yes, I was like working towards hiking Kilimanjaro, but I wasn't working towards a running goal. So it really like, I don't know, diminished some of my intrinsic motivation to like, I still did the thing. I didn't want to though. Like get out there and run. So
Yeah. Like, so
yeah.
you didn't have like that sense of urgency to get all your running miles in and stuff, right?
No, but I mean, I still got them in, but I enjoyed it less. I think like when I was like pursuing the bigger goal, like it just allowed me to be like, okay, like no complaining, like you signed up for this. And then with this go around in the winter, like it definitely took a lot more of like reframing to be like, okay, like the weather's terrible and you're doing this because you enjoy moving your body. Like it was just harder to kind of overcome that. But yeah.
Well, this is something I'll have, Mary, and like as we continue to talk as friends over the coming years,
Yeah.
what happens when you do some of this big stuff is you know that your mental toughness is there, and you know you can push through. And what a lot of people this and I know people listening can relate to this is that because your mental toughness is there, so we let up on the training muscle a little bit. A
Mm,
lot of people do that,
yeah.
and you can do it, but you're still gonna freaking be miserable. You're gonna be miserable if you don't put the time in for some of these efforts. And hopefully, people realize like you still have to continue to train at a pretty decent level to enjoy these efforts for sure.
Agree. I feel like I for the ultra, since I had never done one before, I was so anxious about even switching like the days that runs were happening. I remember like texting you and being like, "I'm gonna do a run tomorrow instead of today," and you're like, "Okay, Mary, it's fine." Whereas without having that running goal on the plate, even though I was in summer guards running almost as much as I was running for that, I just took more liberties to switch things around myself. But yeah, so it's all interesting psychology for sure.
Okay, so last year you trained for the ultra.
Yes.
I was guiding that because I was your coach at the time.
Hmm.
Um, we always call a finish on your first ultra a success. It was a huge success. I
Yeah.
mean, you guys ran in some. everybody's coming from cold weather and running in like 80 degrees. I don't remember what it was, but it's hot. I wasn't even running. Um, when you think back to that race
Mhm.
day, what are some of your big takeaways from that effort? How do you remember it, you know?
Yeah, I so it sits in the positive emotions because time like, lets us forget the negative. No, it
Yeah.
was a very like wonderful experience. I think I learned a lot about my ability to do things that scared me. Specifically, I think that like and this is ironic because then I just summited Kilimanjaro, but like I don't like heights, and so there were a couple parts of the races where you had to like scramble a little, or it was just higher and more exposed than I thought it was going to be. And so facing that and coming on the other side, and I think I shared at the time, like it's like this version of me was born in the moment of actually doing it to get it done that didn't have before. And to be able to take that from the race day and like put that in my pocket, like mental toolbox or pocket to like pull out for subsequent things that I've done that have been included heights has been really powerful. And I think that I was on my feet on at the ultra for a lot longer than I thought I was going to be, which was humbling and then also really empowering in that I learned that I can stay out and do hard things for longer than I think I can. And so I thought I was going to be out for 6 to 8 hours. I think we all finished closer to like 10 or maybe even a little after that, which was pretty mid of the pack for that race, for at least the women's crew that was running. And I am grateful for that retrospectively because like I said, it just like reminded me like I can just keep doing the thing and gave me the experience of having my heart rate sit higher for longer, and like I didn't die. I didn't have a heart attack. My clinician brain, that once like, worst case scenario that something medical is going to happen, it didn't happen. And instead I had like a really nice time and got to spend more time with my friends who were doing the race too.
Yeah, that's cool. So okay, you get done with that thing. You took a
Yes.
little break. How long was your break? Do you remember? A month or something like that, maybe?
Yeah. So I think I took a week off of running altogether, and then I took a break from working with you through the summer, and I kept running, but only like about 15 miles a week, like no more than 20 miles a week, just like kind of short runs to get outside. I have a Peloton bike, so I did that. And then in the fall, right around the time I thought I was going to run a marathon in the fall that I decided not to run, but I had reached out to you to get some training to help get ready for that marathon kind of quickly, like in a 3 month time frame. And I also then had my first backpacking experience without like a guiding company set up like around that
Oh
same
yeah, that's great.
time. Yeah, and so I a friend and I went to upstate New York and hiked in a national or a state park for a couple of days, which was really fun. And it was great to be able to take some of my more recent hiking experience and then experience learning about how to backpack and then combine that with the fitness that I still, probably had from some of our training block, but then in just like maintaining some fitness over the summer. And it made for a very pleasant experience. It turns out hiking is fun if you're in shape.
Yes. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was your first backpacking trip.
I had been on two backpacking trips before, but they were always with guiding companies. So it was my first time doing it by myself or with a friend.
Yeah. Which
Yeah.
do you, which do you like better?
I think they both have their pros and cons. Like in the guiding companies, it's nice because some of the mental load is off and you can focus on the hiking and you oftentimes get to meet new friends. But I do think there is something really like exhilarating about being in charge myself of making sure that, we had enough food and enough water and like how to read a map and yeah, I felt very brave and strong. So that was
It
nice.
it does give you a lot of confidence, man. I've camped a bunch on my own, but usually camping on my own was just like parking somewhere, setting up my tent. It's always out in the middle of nowhere. But this
Yeah.
last fall, I go elk hunt out here. I didn't get anything early in the season when my buddy's out here. We usually try to go out for a week, and he had to bail early. His kid broke his arm, both arms actually,
Yeah.
like 2 days into our hunt. He had to go home. So I was like, all right, I got to get back out there. I don't have anybody to go with. So I put, probably 40 pounds in my pack. And I was going to spike hunt, which means that you just keep all of your tent, all your gear with you at all times,
Mm.
even when you're hunting, like in the nitty gritty part of the hunting.
Wow.
And then you can get to places that where the elk are, and you don't have to hike all the way back to your tent that's set up, which
Mm.
wastes a lot of time in the morning and the evening. You waste a couple hours just getting to and from these places. So I did that, and like there's, coyotes within 50 yards through one of the nights. There's elk bugling everywhere. There's technical terrain. I'm 5 miles in. I had a little bit of service, which was kind of cool.
Yeah.
But the just kind of relaxing yourself a little bit and just realizing like you're either good or you're not, but you can't do anything about it. So you just kind of
You have
give
to just,
yourself to the nature, You just kind of give yourself
yeah.
up a little bit. And knowing that you're going to come out of there 99% of the time fine is really empowering. And I'm excited to do more of that. I'm sure you are too, like just to get out and see
Yeah.
what you're capable of. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, so you do that hike, you skip the marathon you had some personal stuff come up. I think you had someone close
Yeah.
to you
A friend
passed
passed
away.
away, which was
Yeah.
super sad. So yeah, so then we pick up with the marathon training and we kind of you put together this accelerated training block, which again, I think having the ultra training behind me made it so that like my body t tolerated the uptick in miles that we were doing pretty quickly well. And then I decided kind of towards the end of that training block that I didn't actually want to run the marathon. And kind of I kept running, but then just took a couple weeks to like ponder life and decide. And in the meantime, about a year ago, I had signed up to do a hike of Mount Kilimanjaro, which is something I've actually wanted to do since I was a kid and read about Tanzania in school. And but I had just kind of like signed up for this trip and forgotten about it. And then I was like, oh yeah, Scott, I have to like hike this mountain. Like one, do I have the fitness to do this? Two, I live on flat land. Three, I don't like heights. Let's do it.
It's so funny. Well, my wife had just came, by the time you were
Yes.
telling me this, my wife had just come back from her trip. And like we don't have Kilimanjaro here, but we have 14ers, and I've taken a bunch of people up on their first 14er, just, friends and clients and stuff like that. So I knew the general needs, and then after talking to Lauren, I kind of gave you some of her feedback from her experience and everything.
Yeah.
Um, I want to get into that. I had one more question for the Kilimanjaro thing.
Mhm.
So, have you noticed anything when you're not being coached
Yes.
in your day-to-day activity and mentality? So, before I coached you, or before we started training for the ultra,
Hmm.
your day-to-day habits and how you kind of blocked off time for your health and fitness and exercise and strength and all that stuff versus what you do now when you're not being coached. Has it changed at all?
Yes, I would say it changed significantly, not so much in the amount of time I spend training, maybe a little more, running when I'm going through coaching, but generally like the amount of time's the same, but I use the time I think more wisely. So I have a rule with myself that every day the first thing I do is move my body. And so on my off days, that will just be like something simple, like maybe 30 minutes of yoga. But on my on days, it usually involves some sort of cardio. But the addition since working with you as a coach has been strength training. And so I now, even when I'm not working with you, when I was working with you, I think about 4 to 5 days a week where you were adding just a little bit of like core and strength stuff, um 4 or 5 days for like 10 or 15 minutes, and now I do 3 strength training sessions a week, to try to hit upper lower and core. Whereas before I would just kind of thought, oh, like, why am I doing this? It doesn't make a difference, but it's helped prevent, like, I have no, like, knock on wood, running injuries. Like, I just feel like it's like made me such a stronger runner. Like, I feel like my core feels like I have to do less energy to like hold it in a good position to run. And so like the work of running is easier. So I would say that's the big difference is that like strength training is integrated and not just like the extra.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'm a broken record, but I think for the bang for buck, how you feel when you're strong and you're in good running shape is somewhat unmatched as adults anyway. I can't compare it to my young athlete self because I feel like I was always beat up from playing basketball and football and baseball. It just beat your body up in a different way. But as an adult, I think I don't feel good unless I'm strong, and I'm
Oh, a
hoping that
hundred
passes
percent.
down. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm like kissing 40 in age here, and I feel younger than I did when I was 25 and didn't work out. And I started working out when I was about 35. And so it's really just been the last 5 years I've like, been on my, as I like to say, adult onset athlete journey. So,
I love that.
yeah, yeah.
That's cool. All right, so you sign up with Killy. How'd you find the trip? Did you sign up with a buddy, or did you just find it and sign up, or?
I signed up through a friend that I've traveled with before who partners with Trova Trip and then local organizations to host all women's trips. And so I've gone with them to do a short backpacking trip in Joshua Tree once before. And then right before I started working with you 2 falls ago, I did a Patagonia trip. So we did day hikes in Patagonia there. So I had traveled with her a few times before, and so I knew that, she ran, great programs as a nice person, and that there would be other women like me who were doing this thing that was scary, and that we could do it together, and that we would be partnered with a local hiking group. Because I believe to summit Kilimanjaro, you have to have a guide and porter agency that you're working with.
Yeah, yeah, I'm pretty sure you do. That's cool. I so
Yeah.
uh, I need to do this interview with Lauren too. Her trip out there was crazy. Like all kinds of crazy stuff happened. What was your travel itinerary? Like what were the logistics to getting there? How'd you figure it out?
Yeah, so I think that's a nice part about living on the East Coast. And in DC, we have like three major airports. From a flying standpoint, it wasn't terrible. It was long. It was like 24 hours, but it wasn't difficult. I flew out of Washington, DC, and I had a layover in Ethiopia and then landed in Kilimanjaro from there. So it took about 24 hours with the short layover. And then I had flown in a few days early, just me, so I had read that that can be helpful not only with helping with the time change and getting acclimated to the local time, but just also with some of the nerves before doing something. Because some people come either like the day before they're going to start the 5 to 7 day trek up, or 5 to 8 day trek up the mountain. And I just felt like it would be nice to have a day to get my feet literally on the ground before I go up. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So did you have any layovers?
I did. Yeah, I had a short layover in Addis in Ethiopia. I think it was like 3 hours. The first flight was 13 and a half hours, 3 hour layover, and then about an hour and a half flight to Kilimanjaro. And then I had booked my own lodge to stay in, which was really fun, and did like a local tour of like the area at the base of Kilimanjaro with somebody who lives there who was able to tell me more about the history and also like what culture's like. And that was also helpful too, because I feel like it gave me good perspective and understanding better the types of folks who were literally going to be supporting me up the mountain, because I could not have gotten up without the help of the
Yeah.
team, the local team.
No, it's cool how they do it because they do have you do have to have porters assigned or a company assigned to you. I think the group that Lauren went with was with the first or maybe only women-owned business out there for the trip, which is really cool.
Yeah, I would believe that. The guiding company that we went with, we had one female guide, and our head guide, who has been up the mountain like 500 times or so, his name is John and had been doing it forever, said that there are only 27 female guides in all of Kili,
Oh
which
wow.
is crazy because there's hundreds and hundreds of other, male guides.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, what were have you been to Africa before?
No, it was my first time to Africa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were some of your takeaways on the culture early?
Um, I I was really captivated. I think that clearly, it would be, I don't know, short-sighted to go and not recognize the disparities between economic and other resources available to me versus some of the people living there. So that was humbling, and also, something to sit with and ponder and figure out what to do with. So I think that was one takeaway. I think, being a nurse practitioner, I was very curious about healthcare in Tanzania. So I, looked up like the the mortality causes, like the top mortality causes in Tanzania versus the US. And it was really fascinating too, because in Tanzania it's like AIDS and tuberculosis. And I think maybe cancer might be third. Please don't quote me directly, but I think those are the top three. Whereas in the US it's like coronary artery disease, heart attack, strokes, cancer. And so just seeing some of the disparities between causes of death, preventable or otherwise, was humbling. I think that Tanzania, they speak Swahili is the national language, though there are many tribal languages that are still spoken, or local languages, and there's very much like that Hakuna Matata type vibe to being in Tanzania. So like a lot of like things happen on African time. It's not the US. And so that was one difference. And then another difference that I wasn't necessarily anticipating is that nearly all of the food that we ate was local. Because they don't import a lot of food. And so that was really interesting. And it was like nice to eat so much fresh food, because it was either grown or raised right there.
Oh,
So those
nice.
were some
Did you like
things.
the food, generally speaking?
I did, yeah. I think it was like a lot of simple dishes, like lots of like mangoes and pineapples, avocados, potatoes, rice, eggs, pasta. I'm not a huge meat eater, but they had beef and chicken and then goat, I think, were the three that I saw. But yeah,
Yeah.
I liked it.
Well, you can probably guarantee that the protein out there was coming from local.
It was so local that on our last night they had this like celebration feast and the goat still had its head on it.
Yeah.
They wheeled it out for us.
And
Yeah.
I mean, that's what's cool about like small countries. Like that's how it works. It's kind of crazy. I mean, I've had similar experiences in South America and Southeast Asia. Like you go into these, a lot of poor, small little towns that, life's probably pretty tough, but people are generally happy in places where things are simple. I mean, minus the things that you're talking about, like the access to healthcare would definitely,
Mhm.
relieve some stress, and the type of preventable diseases like
Yes.
tuberculosis and AIDS are medically preventable in a lot of different ways
Yeah.
compared to the type of preventable that we have, which is more of
Yeah.
like lifestyle type stuff. But
Hmm. Yeah.
I always think that's interesting. It's also I've said this for years. I think that Americans, I think that any country, not just Americans, I think people should take a gap year before they go to college and go somewhere that's a little bit tougher. I think that'd be good for
Mm-hmm.
people. Just the perspective when you come back and maybe you don't like where you live but you realize, well, oh, this isn't so bad. It's pretty freaking good actually.
Yeah,
That's a good
absolutely.
mentality.
Time on the mountain.
Yeah, how
Yeah.
long were you on the ground before you started prepping?
Yeah, so I was in Machame, a small town at the base of the mountain for a couple days by myself, as I mentioned, and then I went to Moshi, which is another medium-sized town that's at the base, and that's where I met up with the group, and we had our prep and pack out session. So I brought a lot of gear, but I also rented some gear there just so that I didn't have to trek it across the world. So we had a meeting where we met with the guides. They kind of gave us the lay of the land of like, about what time we'd be getting up, but what time we'd be going to bed, the general topography of the trip and what we could expect most days. And then we packed our bags and they kind of double checked our bags for us just to make sure that we had all the essentials because there are some non-negotiable supplies you have to bring to survive. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
no, that's cool. So, were you guys doing a 6 or 7 day trip?
We did the 7 day route, so the routes are anywhere between 5 and 8 days. The logic behind doing a longer route is that there tends to be a higher summit success rate because you have more time to acclimatize to the altitude. So
Yeah,
the 7 day route is pretty popular, but people do shorter and sometimes a longer. I think there are actually routes up to 10 days, but seven was good. 6 nights, 7 days.
yeah. How big was your group?
There were there were 25 of us
Oh
ladies
wow,
doing this. It was a
that's
big
huge.
group. Yeah, big group, all different ages, backgrounds. Everybody had trained pretty well for the trip, so we mostly stuck together for it. And then we had a really big support staff of guides, porters, cooks, other support folks who helped us so that as we were climbing up the 5.5 days it took to go up, we had day packs. Mine was probably, I don't know, between like 15 and 20 pounds because I get anxious and carry extra water. And then the porters helped us carry our other belongings and our tents and all the food and stuff. So it was definitely a supported hike,
Yeah,
which is how most people do it.
so many people in Lauren's group were bringing copious amounts of extra water.
Yeah. I
Why do they do
like,
that?
I don't know. I just like I would like to get back to my tent and I'd have like 2 liters of water left. And I was
I
like, well, it
know.
turns out I don't need 5 liters of water for 6 hours of hiking. But
How much does a liter of water weigh?
oh, I don't even know. How much does it weigh? Do you know?
I think it's 2 pounds.
Okay.
Exactly.
Well,
I think I know that for some reason. Um,
yeah.
don't quote me on that world. I'm pretty sure it's 2 pounds though, or maybe it's like 2.2 or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just funny because like that weight adds up over time when you're hiking uphill. But
Yeah.
give me some stats. Like, what are the stats of the mountain for people who are listening who don't know much about Kilimanjaro? Like,
Yeah. Okay, so it is the tallest mountain in Africa. It is the world's tallest freestanding mountain. It sits at a height of just under 19,500 feet. Um, Most base camps start, I think, at about, oh, I don't know, like 3 to 4,000 feet, depending on what gate you go into. So you're climbing it. My route took 5.5 days to reach the summit and then a day and a half to come down. You hike through different ecosystems. So like I think we started in a rainforest and then we hiked through other ones, the names of which I cannot remember, but every day looked different.
alpine, subalpine,
Yeah,
all those
all
like
those kinds of things, all
I know
those
that you
kinds of
can't remember.
places.
No, that's cool.
And then
How
Okay.
long was the route? Like how many miles?
Um, Truthfully, I don't know. I
Yeah.
don't know how long the actual route was, but what I do know is that many days what we would do is we would hike higher and then camp lower.
Yeah.
So we would like I hike up to like 13,000, but then hike camp down at 12,000. And again, that was to help our bodies like make extra red blood cells so that we wouldn't die on the summit. And actually one day we did an extra hike altogether. So we got to base camp, we like hiked up and then down and then did another acclimatizing hike that night, just like 45 minutes more just to get any blood cells we could into our body, I think.
Yeah.
So that was actually helpful. It felt miserable at the time, a little like a punishment, but I was glad that we got to do that. And I think from an actual like physical standpoint, the hiking itself was not challenging in that, I mean, it was up and you definitely have to prep for it, but it wasn't like the most strenuous hike I had ever been on it. But the altitude just added such a layer of complexity to trying to navigate the days. And I think that nearly everybody, not everybody, but nearly everybody in our group got some level of altitude sickness at different points. And so, and people's remedies to that altitude sickness differed depending on what their symptoms were too. And so I felt fine. I felt a little like more maybe short of breath than like baseline I would otherwise until the first day we hit 15,000 feet at Lava Tower. And I had a terrible headache. And it was so bad that I actually like sat down to lunch and I like dropped a silent tear, trying not to let people know when I'm crying, but it was so painful. And I thought to myself, because that was like day 3 or 4, I was like, if the rest of the hike is going to be like this and I have this terrible headache, I'm not going to be able to do it. Like I
Yeah.
just know that I'm not going to be able to summit. But it turns out that eating some carbohydrates, salt, and then water like took it all away. So even while I was still up there after I had had a little bit of lunch and like drank some electrolytes, like I felt better. It went away and I was like able to get through the rest of the day. And then I was okay again until the summit night,
Nice.
with regards to the altitude. So,
Yeah, altitude sickness is tough, man. Like just staying hydrated well, and sometimes it hits you and you just don't know why. Like you can be dialed in and it hits you. I used to get altitude sickness all the time when I first moved to Colorado, and I hadn't
oh,
had it for a decade. And I went on a ski hut trip a couple years ago, and it just killed me for 2 days. It was just brutal. I had no idea
yeah.
why. Like everything
It,
was dialed, and it's really wild.
It's nuts. Yeah, definitely like it knows no bounds, that's for sure. And I think some people did take prophylactic medicine to prevent symptoms. I chose not to because sometimes the side effects of some of the medicines can actually be the same as altitude sickness. So I didn't take them, but some people found them helpful. Other people didn't. It just kind of depended. But all of us found that staying hydrated, electrolytes, eating, and then even some like things like ginger chews or like cough drops really helped a lot just to like I don't know, keep the senses going and rest, of course. The other tip that a guide had given us was that when we get to camp, oftentimes we feel this rush to like set up our tent right away and do all of that. But as we got higher and higher, he really encouraged us just to take a few minutes to like sit for half an hour before we started like even unpacking our stuff, just to give our body some extra time to cool down before we were like going into our nighttime routine. So that was also helpful.
What was the routine? Did you guys get up early and start every day?
Yeah, so the first days we would wake up around 5:45 and then we would leave around 7. So we'd get up, pack up our tents, get to breakfast, kind of get a rundown of what the day was going to hold. And then our hiking varied in the amount of time, anywhere between like 4 and 8 hours. And that was for the first 5 days, 4-ish 5 days. And then for summit night, base camp is at about 15,000 feet. And you go from 15,000 then to the summit, which is at, like I said, just under 19.5. You leave at midnight to do that and hike through the night and get there in the morning. And so I think all of us were most anxious about that because it was happening at night. It was at the highest altitude and also the steepest part of the climb. And so I really had to mentally kind of break down each of the things that were going to make me anxious and kind of problem solve how I was going to feel better about it. So with regards to hiking through the night, Nurse Mary was like, "Well, you've worked a bunch of night shifts, so you're just gonna have to be like, this is night shift mentality. Like, it's fine." So that really helped with that to remind myself that I'd stayed up all night multiple times before and done functional work, so this was no different. With regards to the cold, it was I think with the wind chill at between negative 15 and 20 Fahrenheit at the top, and I am from Wisconsin, and I said to myself, Mary, you used to hike across campus when it was just this cold or colder to go to class, and so I mean, I did layer appropriately and I brought hand warmers and I really truly didn't feel cold, which I do think was mental because I had every reason to be cold. And so that was helpful then to pull on that experience. With regards to the altitude sickness, I had already trialed and errored as I shared about what helped my symptoms. And so I knew what to do if I was starting to get a headache, which was to stay on top of the fluids, electrolytes, and food. And that helped, though I did still get kind of sick at the top. And then with regards to the actual physical, that's where the ultra training really kicked in because as we talked about at the top of our time together, I remembered that I had spent 10 hours on my feet doing something hard with my heart rate high. And I was doing that again. And it took us about, I think, 7 hours ish to get to the summit. And so I knew it was shorter than that. So I just, gaslighted myself into believing that it was possible. So
That's funny.
those four things really like breaking down all the things that were stressful and knowing that I had experienced it before and then was going to try to do it all together was super helpful. And then I also do nerdy things, which I kind of talked about when I was on the podcast before with the ultra. Like I like to say mantras to myself in the third person, like, you're doing a good job, Mary. And that really helps. And so I did that. Um, and I kind of got this from you, Scott. I like no complaining. Like, come on. Like, I have like the physical capacity to do this thing. Like, I can't complain about it. I'm the one who signed up for it. So having, reorienting to positivity helped. And then the other thing is, and I don't know if again it was the altitude or just hiking at night, there were times where I felt slightly disoriented. Like a couple times I saw somebody's shoes and I thought it was an animal, and they're like, no, that's not an animal. So I don't know if it was like the hypoxia or the
Probably.
the night, but really grounding myself to like physical things around me was super helpful too, and be like, oh, that like rock is there and it's real and you're going to keep going. And I couldn't have done it without the help of folks. I started to feel really weak about 2 hours from the top, I think at about 17,500, and at that point they had like tons of guides and porters with us to like make sure we were okay, and I was walking with the porter who was helping me, just like kind of stay behind me or whatever, make sure I didn't fall off the mountain. And I really wanted to hang on to my own pack. It felt really important to me. And he kept trying to take it. And I was like, no, no, it's fine. It's fine. And then finally he like reached for it for like a fourth time. And I like started crying because I felt so sad. I just was like, I feel so weak. I'm like so strong. And yet you're taking my pack. I'm tired. I like think shoes are animals and I have a headache. Like, and I'm very short of breath at this point too. I don't know what my pulse ox was at the top, but at base camp it was 89, and normally a human is at 100. So I'm like, well, it's got to be lower than 89 now.
Yeah.
So I was, from a clinician's standpoint, trying not to freak myself out that I was causing like an anoxic brain injury. So um,
Oh no.
he took the pack, and then he said, "Don't worry, you're still a strong woman. I'm just gonna help you." And it was like there was nothing else he could have said that would have soothed the moment as beautifully as that did, because I think that truly was my fear, was that like I would be perceived as like weak, but it wasn't. It was like I was getting help from somebody who has the experience to like help people through this, and I felt really grateful for him. And we got to the top, we celebrated, took pictures up there for like 10 or 15 minutes, and I turned to him and I said, I need to get the F off this mountain right now. And he grabbed me by the arm and we ran down. And then again, when I got to about 17.5, I felt like a new human. I felt just absolutely back to my baseline, and I took my pack back and, meandered down
Yeah.
to base camp.
Isn't that wild? Like you could feel like complete garbage, and if you just go down, like you almost feel 100 times. It's just weird. Like it never
Yes.
happened. It's so weird.
Yes.
I always got
Yes.
this thing, and I never really looked it up, but it makes sense. Like going doing extended high altitude stuff, and then coming back down to sea level, like you get kind of buzzy. I think it's just from
Hmm.
I think it's from the extra blood cells. Energy's up.
Absolutely.
Even if you're physically exhausted, like you're kind of buzzy and alert, and it's really cool.
Yeah, amped up. Yeah, it was the whole thing was bizarre. Like it felt like that the summit night felt like a dream. I truly felt like we were hiking up to the stars, and then you'd look down and see like a line of headlamps towards base camp, and so it felt like the stars were falling. It was beautiful. It was hard. And I was trying to think too. I do think that the ultra was definitely physically harder for sure. Like the ultra is still the hardest physical thing I've ever done. I think that the Kilimanjaro was more maybe mentally challenging just because it was longer and there were different experiences associated, and like I had never camped more than a few days, so even like 6 nights in a tent felt different, not showering, just not having, contact with my loved ones, and then feeling so tired at night I didn't want to necessarily, I'd brought a Kindle to read and I didn't read it because I was just tired and I wanted to like, I don't know, lay down and be present. And so um I do feel like it's just another one of these great experiences that I can like kind of tuck away because in my mind, like ultimately I do want to do a longer ultra at some point. And I had said I would never do like anything more than 50 miles. I don't want to run through the night. But now I'm like, okay, well, I did this thing where I like moved all night long. So like maybe I could if I like actually wanted to. So
Yeah, that was a big reason I didn't do 100 for years. Like when I first got into this world and I started coaching a lot of ultra runners, and it went from coaching like half marathoners to ultra runners, and just kind of kept growing from that. But I'd only done a couple ultras in the early days, and then we had kids, and sleep was such a it was such a thing back in the day. And I'm good off a little sleep, but I'm not good off of no sleep. So I
yeah.
just didn't want to waste. I didn't even want to waste a day of sleep, and that's why I didn't do hundreds in the early days. But I think once you go do something like that, or like the hunting stuff, has really gotten me better at sleep. Moving when I'm sleep deprived.
Mm,
Yeah, it's not as scary as you think, and it's actually the parts that you're fearing the most are the parts that are sometimes the coolest. Like hiking in
yeah.
the middle of the night in a foreign country to the top of this big mountain had to be pretty cool.
Yeah, it absolutely was. It will definitely go down as like one of my favorite memories. And I'm really proud of myself. Like I just like then I like step back and see like this like dear little Mary who like, as I said, adult onset athlete who is scared of heights who did this thing. Um and I feel so grateful because I know that like this is gonna sound cheesy, but like every step of running and prepping and step up and like back stairwell, like hike up and down with my pack on, made it so that the physical stress of the trip was less so that I could focus on maintaining my like mental and emotional health and like staying in a positive, headspace. And I feel really grateful. And I don't think I could have done it alone. And I think that's like a big takeaway as well is that like I can do this big thing and I can do it with help of, like either the actual help of like the porters and the people around me or the camaraderie help of doing it with other people who are excited by it. And that really helped carry the day too. And it's like if I'm having a rough moment, people helped me. And if other people were having a rough moment, we helped each other. We like pooled our ibuprofen and Tylenol together to make sure everybody was feeling okay. And um yeah,
That's
it
cool.
was nice.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to like one of my life philosophies is you've got to be able to take care of yourself before you can take care of other people, and physically is important as mentally. It all ties together, and just knowing that you can go into a situation, be one of the stronger people in the group, or at least one of the mentally toughest people in the group, is really empowering. It's kind of cool. Did you have any? I was going to ask this when you were talking about
Yeah.
the hard part of the hike. Um, these spammers, dude. 20 calls a day I get for spammers.
Oh, that's so many.
It's unreal. I thought I had my volume off. Um, but yeah, so where was that?
Hardest part of the hike.
Oh yeah. So when you were doing that hard part,
Hmm.
because you're in a big group, was there
Hmm.
any outward negativity that was,
Hmm.
yeah? Because
Yeah, there was
that
some.
that's
I
hard because
think,
you're like being tough to like keep yourself in a good space, and you have people outwardly being negative. Like that happens in races too, you know?
yeah. But what I will say though, let me rephrase. I actually don't think people were outwardly negative because it was actually this like unicorn group of like people, everyone was doing the best they could, and there were hard emotions, just by nature of like the actual like physical nature of it. And so I think that like as a kind of a caretaker personality, I had to remember that, like you said, I have to take care of myself first. And I like, if I'm barely hanging on, barely breathing and need some help getting up the mountain, I have to focus on that. But I do feel like generally the people in my group were like very positive and uh 20 of the 25 made it to the summit, which is amazing. Four other people attempted summit, and one woman, she got sick pretty early down that I think with a virus that was unrelated to the altitude. And people got really like sick. Like some people had vertigo and other issues, and they still pressed towards the top. Like when two of the women got in a car accident before when they arrived in Tanzania and like still like attempted summit. So it's just amazing. I think I really learned a lot. And also seeing there were some folks who were super strong athletes on our trip. One girl had just run a 100 miler, and so she like was like bounding up the mountain, and I could just kind of ride on her coattails a couple times. I would just ask her questions, so she would keep talking and distract me on the way up. She was so wonderful.
Did you get
Yeah.
any quiet time on your hikes?
Yeah, a fair amount, I would say. Like I think there were actually a couple times where the group was spread out enough I was hiking by myself kind of by choice. There were people close enough that if I needed help I could get help, but there was definitely a lot of solitude on the hikes. And some people you kind of knew who liked to chat and who didn't, and just depending on my mood. I tend to like I stuck towards like the middle of the pack, I would say. Occasionally I would like, kind of go towards the back if I wanted to go a little slower. And then right after I had my first bout with altitude sickness, I was like, I am like a superhuman. I feel so much better. And so I was towards the front then, but for the most part, I was, middle to the back. So
Heck yeah, dude. Did you
yeah.
guys have a clear night on your summit day?
Yes, it was magical. It was just so magical. You could see every star. We had only one day that had rain part of the day. Um, yeah, it was perfect. I couldn't ask for anything to be different. About the trip. It just, even the hard parts, I'm glad about them because I am still here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. What was coming back like? Did you have like the post race kind of blues thing going on? Because travel does that to me too. I don't know if it does it to you, but big
For
travel
sure.
puts me down for about 1 or 2 weeks mentally.
Yeah, yeah. I stayed an extra day with one of the girls and we did like a day safari, which was super fun. And then the journey back was a little bit longer just because I had a longer layover in Ethiopia. And then I think, I got back just over a week ago from the trip. And I think I still feel like I'm ruminating over the experience and like learning and gleaning from it, but I definitely have this sense of like, what now? Because I don't have anything big on the schedule. I do have a backpacking trip in April on the books, but I don't have any big races, lined up, and I'm not quite sure what I want to do. And so I think that is leading to some of my ambivalence too, of like knowing now that I know I can do this big thing, I want to, keep doing big things. So for sure. But I'm just trying to like give myself grace, and I miss the people, I miss the other girls on the trip because when you go through a bonding experience like that, it's like instant friendship, and
Yeah, that's
yeah.
awesome. I love that part about hard things.
Yeah.
All right, so last question. What do you have next? And if you don't have something specific, where are you like, what are you looking at when you get it, when you're trying to get excited about the future?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I did just get a spot in the Marine Corps Marathon in October in DC. So that's like our local marathon. So, but I also sometimes sign up for marathons and don't run them. So I'm just gonna like lay that out there too. So yeah, so that's on the books now as of yesterday, which is nice. I know I have talked to you offline several times about wanting to run a 50 miler, which I'm still loosely holding. And then I think for the summer, minus my goal of continuing to like keep some sort of running base and also hit my 1,000th ride on my Peloton, which is so close. I actually truly do want to continue to work on strength training and focusing on that. Because as I shared earlier, have seen the benefit of that in a way that I didn't really appreciate before. So that's kind of my summer plan, is to do that and then maybe transition into some marathon training and pray about another ultra longer.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Mary, thanks for taking the time, dude. I thought it'd be fun to talk about it, and like you always have this little recording to remember hopefully some details that you wouldn't if you don't write them down or share them in other ways. Uh, oh, I guess the one other question I did have:
Yeah.
how was your husband? What did he think about everything when you got
Oh
back?
my gosh, cheerleader,
Yeah,
cheerleader. He was the one who encouraged me to sign up even when I was like, oh, I don't know, it sounds scary. So he had cheered me the whole time and was really helpful. He went on a lot of the training hikes. You had me doing a lot of longer hikes getting ready for the trip with my pack on, so he would come with me to do those. And I think also as we were talking about the winter weather, that winter weather hit right before I was leaving for the trip, which made me anxious that I wasn't physically prepared enough for the trip. And he was the one who was like, you have enough fitness, like you were going to be fine. And so I really appreciated his support, and I'm trying to get him on a backpacking trip with me, so that's
oh,
my
that's
next
cool.
goal too. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Well, thanks for sharing your story. If you guys are listening, I'll have a couple of her pictures that she sent me on text. I'm going to throw them on the socials. And is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you,
I'm
Scott, I
You guys
appreciate
can
it.
see she sent me some epic pictures it looked like from Summit Day. And yeah, if you guys have anything to add or if you've done this trip and you wanted to talk to Mary or if you're thinking about doing the trip and you want to talk to her, hit her up. She's easy to find. You can find me at becomingultra@gmail.com, but through any of the socials you can get a hold of her. It's a small operation over here. I keep having people reach out with products and stuff when they get on the podcast. And they
Oh,
keep asking me about my team and if we'd like to look at products. And like I used to just turn I mean, literally like 2 or 3 a week. I used to just turn them all away because it just creates
Yeah.
work for me on
Yeah.
these small weird products that I don't want to mess with. But in the last 2 weeks, I just tell people, you know what? Send me your crap. I'll check it out, and if it's cool, then you can hop on the podcast and we'll have a conversation. But it's crazy how anyway. So that's what I'll say. We are not a team. It's just me. It's just a team of one.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
thank you
I
guys for
love it. Thank
listening.
you.
Really appreciate it. Hopefully this recorded, eh?